He's Bridgerton's heartthrob, those eyes, that charm, that slow-burning stare everyone talks about. But in real life, Jonathan Bailey is living a truth the industry doesn't want to see. He's kissing women on screen while quietly losing roles because he's gay. No headlines, no drama, just quiet strength and a story bigger than any Netflix romance ever written. So how did a quiet boy from the English countryside become a gay icon while playing the most desirable straight man on television? Let's go back to the very beginning, before the cravats, before the steamy Netflix moments, before the world collectively swooned over a certain Viscount Bridgerton. We're talking about a little boy from a quiet village in Oxfordshire named Jonathan Bailey. No, not one of those born into Hollywood stories. His dad worked in aviation. His mom was an audiologist. Showbiz wasn't exactly in the family blueprint. But somehow at just 5 years old, Jonathan saw a stage production of Oliver, and something inside him lit up. Not just the usual, I want to be on stage sparkle. No, he came home from that theater like a kid possessed. If most kids leave a musical humming the tunes, Jonathan left thinking, I need to be up there. That's where I belong. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. By age 7, he landed his first professional role in A Christmas Carol with the Royal Shakespeare Company. Yeah, let that sink in. While most kids are still learning how to read aloud without getting embarrassed, Jonathan was out here doing Dickens in front of paying audiences. Some of us were collecting Pokemon cards. He was collecting applause. But here's the wild part. He didn't act like a prodigy. He wasn't out there demanding Evian and lighting gels. He just loved it. Genuinely. He had this quiet obsession with storytelling, with slipping into characters, with that strange magic of becoming someone else for a little while. And he never stopped. Throughout his childhood, he took on small roles in British TV shows like Badial's Syndrome, The Bill, and Doctors. You probably saw him at some point and didn't even realize it because he wasn't the flashy kid. He was the one doing the work, scene after scene, getting better with every project. And somehow, through all that, he still went to school, still did his homework, still managed to be a regular kid, except, one with a Shakespeare credit on his acting reel by age 8. No big deal. His home life helped keep things grounded. He was the youngest of 4, with 3 older sisters. And if you've ever had older sisters, you already know they don't let you get cocky. You could be on national TV and still get roasted at the dinner table for mispronouncing quiche. That kind of sibling dynamic builds humility real fast. And then there's the emotional side of things. Jonathan wasn't the loudest kid in the room. He wasn't trying to be everyone's favorite, but people noticed him anyway, because he felt things deeply. Even as a child, he had this rich emotional world, and acting gave him a space to explore that without apology, which, let's be honest, is rare, especially for boys. Society isn't exactly handing out gold stars to sensitive kids. But theater said, feel everything, show us more. And Jonathan listened. Now, to be clear, he wasn't publicly out at the time, but privately, he knew. And that self-awareness, even if it was unspoken, shaped how he moved through the world. He said in interviews that growing up, there weren't many visible queer role models, so he became his own compass, carefully navigating auditions, scripts, casting rooms, carrying his truth quietly but firmly. Like a secret you don't hide out of shame, but because you're waiting for the right moment to share it. And maybe that's what made his performances so compelling. He wasn't acting to escape, he was acting to reveal. Even in those early roles, there was depth, nuance, a kind of emotional honesty that you can't fake. Casting directors started to take note, not in the overnight sensation way, but in that, who is this kid and why do I keep remembering his face kind of way. He wasn't chasing celebrity. He was becoming the kind of actor who makes celebrity irrelevant. Now, let's pause for a second. Can you imagine being 12 years old and more emotionally fluent than half the adults you know? Jonathan could take a scene and inject it with softness, sadness, tension, wit, and never once make it look like he was trying. That kind of natural storytelling, it's gold. And it doesn't come from ambition, it comes from love. He loved it, all of it. The rehearsals, the nerves, the table reads, the weird stage makeup. He loved the process more than the praise. And honestly, that might be the secret to why he's still here, still thriving, all these years later. Because while others were sprinting toward fame, Jonathan was slow cooking a career with real substance. So no, he wasn't discovered on some random talent show. He didn't go viral with a dance video. He just kept showing up, day after day, scene after scene, role after role. And that's the thing about quiet consistency. It sneaks up on people. One day, you're the sweet kid from Oxfordshire. The next, you're the heartthrob of an international Netflix series. But we'll get to that. First, let's talk about the moment Jonathan Bailey walked onto a stage in London's West End and left every single person in the audience breathless. The lights dimmed, the orchestra swelled, and out walked Jonathan Bailey, dressed sharp, eyes wide, jaw tight, ready to sing one of the most chaotic songs in all of musical theater history. And let me tell you, not a single person in that London audience was ready for what was about to happen. This wasn't the same soft-spoken boy from Oxfordshire anymore. This was Jamie. Neurotic, hilarious, spiraling. In Stephen Sondheim's gender-flipped revival of Company, Jonathan played the anxious groom-to-be delivering the high-speed panic attack known as Getting Married Today. And no joke, it's not even a song. It's a full-on cardiovascular event, like if a heart murmur had a beat. You have to be part opera singer, part auctioneer, part Olympic sprinter to even survive it. But Jonathan, he didn't just survive, he torched it, night after night. No stumbles, no gasps, no sweat. Well, maybe some, just the sharp, flawless delivery that made everyone in the room forget how to breathe. Critics lost their minds. One called it exhilaratingly unhinged, which, if you're familiar with Sondheim, is actually a compliment. Another said he stole the show. Audience members started whispering his name during intermission like they'd just witnessed a crime scene. In a good way. But here's what most people didn't know. This wasn't just about hitting notes and making people laugh. For Jonathan, this role was personal. Because Jamie wasn't just funny. Jamie was gay. Openly, joyfully, chaotically gay. And for the first time in Jonathan's career, he got to play a character that matched his own truth. Not coded, not closeted. Just there, center stage, full volume, no disclaimers. You have to understand, up until that point, Jonathan had been careful. Like many queer actors, he'd been told explicitly that coming out would cost him. He's spoken about agents and casting directors who warned him not to be too open, that being gay could ruin his chances at leading man roles, as if honesty was somehow disqualifying, as if straightness was the default setting for desirability. But here, in Company, something shifted. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't minimizing. He was singing about his wedding day panic in a room full of strangers, and they loved him for it. Every laugh he got, every standing ovation, every person dabbing their eyes at the final curtain, it was all proof that truth plays better than fear. And then came the award. The Laurence Olivier Award, arguably the biggest honor in British theater, was placed in his hands in 2019. Best Supporting Actor in a Musical. That's not just a pat on the back. That's the industry saying, we see you, we hear you, and you belong here. Imagine how that must have felt. After years of side roles, second guesses, and subtle warnings to stay quiet, suddenly his full, authentic self was being celebrated, not tolerated, not applauded with caveats, celebrated. It wasn't just a personal victory, it was cultural. It said something bigger about where the industry was heading. That maybe, just maybe, audiences were done pretending that queer characters should stay on the sidelines. That maybe casting directors could stop assuming that gay actors couldn't play straight lovers, or that straight actors should be the default for gay roles. That maybe, finally, truth and talent could share the same spotlight. And Jonathan? He took it all in with that classic low-key charm. No ego, no grandstanding, just this quiet, steady joy. Like someone who'd been building toward this moment piece by piece, and now, the puzzle clicked. He said in interviews that Company changed him, gave him the confidence to stop segmenting his identity, to stop treating his personal truth like a PR liability, and to start taking up space, as a gay man, as a romantic lead, as an actor who could do more than just fit in. And let's not forget, he was hot, like unfairly hot. somehow managing to deliver pitch-perfect comedy while also looking like he just stepped out of a GQ spread. Honestly, it's rude. The rest of us are out here struggling to pick an Instagram filter, and he's out there belting Sondheim in a suit and looking like that. But I digress. Here's what matters. Company was more than a show. It was a turning point. It gave Jonathan Bailey the stage he deserved and the freedom he needed. It proved that queer stories, queer actors, queer joy don't need permission to be central. They already are. Jonathan didn't need to shout it from the rooftops. He just had to show up as himself, with the talent to match, and let the truth do the talking. That's what made him magnetic. That's what made him matter. And as his feet touched the stage one last time in that final bow, something had changed. Not just in his career, but in him. You could see it. He stood taller, looser, like someone who'd stopped holding their breath. From that moment on, the rules were different. He wasn't auditioning to belong anymore. He belonged. So when the next call came, the one that would take him from brilliance to global obsession, it didn't feel random. It felt earned. Like the next note in a song he'd been building for years. A new role. A new risk. And this time, the spotlight wasn't just on stage. When Bridgerton premiered in late 2020, the world was still mid-pandemic, mid-chaos, and, let's be honest, mid-sweatpants. But suddenly, Netflix dropped a Regency-era drama full of orchestral Ariana Grande covers, corset politics, and scandalous whispers in ballrooms. And tucked inside all that glitter and gossip was Anthony Bridgerton. Played, of course, by Jonathan Bailey. At first, he wasn't front and center. In season 1, Anthony was more of a brooding subplot, the strict older brother, the one getting scolded by his mother, frowning in corners, and having highly questionable outdoor affairs with opera singers. His shirt stayed on, mostly. His emotional walls, fully up. But even then, there was something about him. Something that made you look twice. Maybe it was the tension, maybe it was the sadness under the surface, or maybe it was just Jonathan's ability to make quiet discomfort feel magnetic. While everyone else was obsessing over the Duke of Hastings, a lot of viewers were secretly thinking, okay, but who's the hot, stressed-out one with the sideburns? By season 2, that question became the main storyline. Anthony took center stage, and Jonathan took the risk. Not just as an actor stepping into the romantic lead, but as a gay man stepping into the straightest, most fan-thirst-inducing role of the year. And he owned it. Let's talk about the eyes for a second. Because somehow, Jonathan Bailey managed to make eye contact feel like foreplay. His character was constantly at war with himself, with his duty, with his feelings. And that emotional chaos? He didn't play it big, he played it tight. Shoulders stiff, breath shallow. Every movement saying, I want this, but I can't. And every glance, that was the scream underneath. That, my friends, is acting. He didn't need monologues. He had moments. The silent stares, the cracking voice in the rain, the subtle clench of his jaw at a dinner party. There was an entire storm happening behind his eyes, and the camera caught all of it. And then there was the bee scene. I mean, if you know, you know. Never has a single insect caused so much sexual tension on screen. One sting, one gasp, one very charged glance down her chest, and suddenly, half the internet was on fire. People were rewatching that scene like it was homework. But here's the thing. None of it felt forced. Jonathan didn't lean into macho cliches. He didn't play Anthony like a romance novel cover come to life. He played him like a man unraveling, piece by piece. And that vulnerability, that restraint, that's what made it hot. Now layer this with the fact that Jonathan Bailey is openly gay, and what he pulled off becomes even more extraordinary. For decades, Hollywood treated queerness like a casting liability. Gay men were told to hide, told they'd never be believable as straight leads, that audiences wouldn't buy it. And yet, here was Jonathan, out, proud, and completely rewriting that tired old narrative. He once said, I didn't think I could ever be the romantic lead. And now, he was the romantic lead. In one of the most watched shows on Netflix, period. And audiences didn't just accept it, they adored it. Thirst tweets flew, fan edits exploded. Viewers across all spectrums were swooning over Anthony Bridgerton. Straight women, queer men, grandmas, millennials who thought they were too emotionally mature for this kind of content. Nope, Jonathan had us all. But he didn't just steal hearts, he shifted expectations. Because what he proved is this: romance is about connection, not orientation. It's about feeling, not formula. And when you cast someone who understands longing, who's lived through it, who knows what it's like to want something you're told you shouldn't, well, that hits different. And Jonathan didn't need to hide who he was to get there. He didn't straighten himself up for the camera. He didn't deflect or dodge questions in interviews. He showed up as himself and let the work speak. That visibility matters, not just for actors, for everyone. Because whether you're a kid watching from your bedroom or an actor waiting for your first big break, seeing someone like Jonathan Bailey lead with truth, that plants something powerful. And let's be honest, it's also refreshing to have a heartthrob who can brood, break down, and belt a show tune if needed. Anthony Bridgerton wasn't just hot, he was layered, and Jonathan made that happen. So no, he didn't become famous because of the shirts he took off. He became iconic because of what he held in. That tension, that torment, that tenderness wrapped in armor. That's what made people fall in love, not just with Anthony, but with Jonathan Bailey himself. But as the world was swooning over the fictional Viscount, Jonathan was still navigating a very real truth. For most of his career, he'd been told not to be too honest about who he was. He'd known he was gay for years. That wasn't the hard part. The hard part was what the industry told him that meant. Agents warned him, don't talk about it. If you want to play the lead, don't make it public. You can be gay, just don't be seen as gay. And for a while, he listened. Not out of shame, but out of strategy. Because back then, the math was brutal. One honest answer in a magazine, and suddenly casting directors didn't see you in romantic roles. Suddenly, you weren't believable as someone who could fall in love with a woman, even though acting is literally pretending to be someone you're not. Have you ever been told to hold back, just to fit someone else's idea of what you're supposed to be? Jonathan once said he'd been explicitly told that coming out would cost him leading man work, that some roles he auditioned for, he never had a shot. Not because of talent, but because someone on the other side of the table had already decided what love was supposed to look like. And still, he kept going. He played the game for a while, smiled politely, gave vague answers, dodged questions with a wink and a laugh. But deep down, he knew that every half-truth took something out of him. And after years of shrinking, of hesitating, of sitting through casting sessions knowing the room didn't see all of him, he hit a limit. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't defiant. It was simply time. He came out publicly, not with a red carpet statement or headline-grabbing confession, but in a quiet moment of clarity. He told the truth because he was tired of filtering. He was tired of being asked to edit himself just to be considered romantic enough. And ironically, the moment he stopped hiding, his career took off. When he won the Olivier Award in 2019, he was already out. When he took on Bridgerton, he was out. And yet, he was still cast as a smoldering straight romantic lead, and not just accepted, but worshipped for it. Isn't it wild that honesty was the risk, and also the thing that finally unlocked everything? That didn't go unnoticed. Because for decades we've watched straight actors win awards for playing gay roles, and yet actual gay actors were told they couldn't even pretend to be straight. That double standard? Jonathan saw right through it, and instead of raging, he responded with truth. In interview after interview, he spoke calmly but clearly. Being out is political, he said. Not performative, not aggressive, just political. Because in a world where so many people still feel unsafe being seen, visibility itself becomes an act of resistance. Do you remember the first time you saw someone like you and suddenly felt less alone? But he didn't weaponize his identity. He didn't make it a brand. He let it live in the open, and then he went back to work. What made him powerful wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. No soapbox, no self-congratulation, just honesty, thoughtfulness. A kind of emotional intelligence that said, you don't have to scream to be heard, you just have to mean it. And people heard him. Young actors started referencing him. Journalists wrote about how refreshing it was to see a queer man speak so plainly and still book the gig. Fans, especially queer ones, saw something in him that went beyond good looks and period drama charm. They saw someone walking into rooms they were once locked out of and leaving the door open behind him. Have we ever needed that kind of visibility more than right now? He never claimed to be a trailblazer, but let's be real, he blazed one anyway. And through it all, he never stopped smiling. Never stopped joking about the absurdity of it all. In one moment, he'd be talking about systemic barriers in casting. In the next, laughing about how many cravats he had to wear on set. That's the balance. That's what makes him not just important, but likable. He's not trying to be perfect, he's just trying to be whole. And maybe that's why so many people trust him, not just as a performer, but as a person. Because when Jonathan Bailey speaks, you don't hear spin. You hear someone who's been there. Who knows what it's like to walk into a room wondering if being yourself might cost you everything, and still walk in anyway. And every time he does, he makes it a little easier for someone else to follow. But once you've opened the door for others, what do you do next? Do you walk through quietly, or do you kick it wide open and bring a whole damn spotlight with you? And here's where things could have gone. Predictable. He could have coasted. Could have stayed in the Bridgerton lane, lace collars, perfect jawlines, steamy stares, and just played it safe. Hollywood would have eaten that up. He could have taken the shirtless blockbuster route. You know the one. But Jonathan Bailey? He took a detour. And honestly, it's what separates the stars from the storytellers. Because next came Fellow Travelers, and if you haven't seen it yet, pause this video and come back later. Seriously, this wasn't just a gay romance. It was a political punch to the gut disguised as a love story, set in the paranoia-drenched 1950s, where being queer wasn't just taboo, it was a threat to national security. And Jonathan said yes to playing Tim Laughlin, a young man navigating love, faith, and fear at a time when loving the wrong person could cost you your career, your freedom, or worse. This wasn't a glossed-over version of gay history. There were no rainbow filters here. This was intimate, complicated, unapologetic, and maybe that's what made it so magnetic. Because let's be real, how often do we see male intimacy portrayed without the camera flinching, without the story rushing to reassure straight audiences that it's not too much? Jonathan didn't flinch, not once. He leaned in, with every kiss, every silence, every fight, and the result? Pure electricity. He and Matt Bomer didn't just have chemistry, they lit the screen on fire, with scenes that felt personal, political, and painfully real. The kind of scenes that make you sit still for a moment after the credits roll, and ask yourself, have I ever had to hide the best parts of myself just to survive? And while we're here, can we talk about how brave that choice was? Because let's not pretend the industry has completely evolved. There are still agents whispering, don't go too gay. Still producers asking, will this make him less bankable? Jonathan said, let them ask. I'm busy telling stories that matter. And then, just when you think he's going to settle into prestige TV forever, boom. Wicked, a complete 180, and yet, somehow the perfect follow-up. Now, if you've ever belted out Defying Gravity in the shower, don't lie, we all have. You know how iconic this story is. And now it's heading to the big screen with Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo, and yes, Jonathan Bailey as Fiyero. Here's what makes this move brilliant. It's not a queer role. It's not a political one. It's just a role. A charming, romantic, leading man in a Hollywood musical. And no one blinked. No one questioned whether he could pull it off. That in itself is progress. Because the goal was never to limit openly gay actors to gay roles. The goal is for them to play everything. The prince, the soldier, the hero, the heartbreaker. And with Wicked, Jonathan steps fully into that space. No compromise, no disguise, just talent and presence. And don't get it twisted, this wasn't just about career growth, it was about cultural impact. Because let's be real, the Wicked fandom is one of the most passionate, dramatic, and yes, delightfully queer communities out there. Jonathan knew exactly what he was stepping into, and he didn't shy away. He twirled right into it with a grin. What does that tell us? It tells us that queer actors don't have to shrink themselves to fit old molds, that vulnerability can coexist with swagger, that you can hold your truth and still command the mainstream, maybe even more because of it. And look, we're not saying Jonathan Bailey is carrying the weight of the entire industry on his perfectly tailored shoulders, but he's showing us something, that every choice he makes, every script he picks, every story he joins isn't just about the next paycheck. It's about progress, representation, and showing up without apology. If you thought Bridgerton was the peak, let's press pause right there. That was just the teaser. The curtain hadn't even risen on what Jonathan Bailey was really about to do. Because the deeper you follow his career, the more you realize he's not just coasting on charm or chasing fame. He's out here shifting the culture, gently, persistently, and with more purpose than noise. Let's paint a picture, not of red carpets or award speeches, but of a quiet moment, someone alone in their room, watching fellow travelers late at night. They're not looking for representation. They're looking for a mirror. And there it is, a kiss that isn't rushed, a silence that speaks volumes, a story that doesn't apologize for existing. That's the kind of impact we don't always see on paper. But it's happening, one scene at a time, one honest role at a time, one human moment at a time. And when Jonathan Bailey shows up, on screen, in interviews, on stage, it never feels like he's selling you something. It feels like he's inviting you in, not as a fan, but as a fellow traveler, pun intended. Let's talk about how he carries all this. The fame, the responsibility, the expectation. You've seen it before. Actors who feel the pressure to be spokespeople, role models, brand ambassadors, all while trying to memorize lines and hit their marks. But Jonathan, he's flipped the script. He doesn't wear queerness like a badge or a burden. He just lives it. Openly, softly, powerfully. Remember that line? Being out is political. He didn't shout it. He said it like a truth he's known for a long time, and finally got the chance to say out loud. That wasn't just a mic drop moment. It was a lighthouse, a signal to anyone watching. You can be visible and still be valuable. And maybe that's what resonates, the way he holds space for himself and for others. You see it in his interviews, where he speaks thoughtfully, not performatively. You see it at fan events, where he leans in, makes eye contact, really listens. You see it in the way he chooses roles, never chasing typecasts, but challenging the industry to keep up with him. And yes, let's not lie, he's got the kind of face that could sell out cologne ads for the next decade. But that's not what keeps people watching. It's the warmth, the depth, the way he makes you feel like he's rooting for you, even from a screen. Here's a real talk moment. Queer representation has come a long way, but it still has miles to go. There are still casting directors asking, can he play straight? Still fans whispering, isn't he too out? And yet, here's Jonathan, taking up space, playing lovers, heroes, complex men, and doing it all without shrinking who he is. It's not just about the scripts he chooses, it's about the stories he's telling and who he's telling them for. For those who grew up hiding their hearts, for those who didn't see themselves on screen until far too late, for the next generation who might grow up thinking this kind of honesty is normal. Imagine that. And have you noticed the fans? They're not just there for the smolder. They're there for the softness, the authenticity, the sense that here's a man who's not afraid to laugh at himself, to tear up during a scene, to admit he's still figuring it all out. Because let's face it, aren't we all? That's the kind of connection that doesn't fade with trends. It builds something lasting. It turns admiration into trust, fandom into community, and it sends a quiet message. You matter, just as you are. So here's a thought. What happens when someone like Jonathan Bailey gets to lead? Not just in shows, but in shaping the future of storytelling. What kind of world are we creating where someone like him isn't the exception, but the standard? Because at this point, Jonathan Bailey isn't just playing characters. He's becoming part of our story. And something tells me we're only getting started. Ultimately, this isn't just a story about an actor. It's about what happens when someone chooses to show up, fully, authentically, without asking for permission. Jonathan Bailey didn't wait for the industry to change. He became part of what was changing it. He didn't shout, he didn't beg for attention. He just kept showing up, quirky, brilliant, unapologetic. And in doing so, he made room for the rest of us to breathe a little easier. So if you're wondering where you fit in, maybe the answer isn't to fit in at all. Maybe it's to stand out, like he did. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. More powerful stories, more presence, and more voices are coming your way. See you next time. Keep showing up. The world needs your story too.